So today's topic is something I only heard about recently. That is professional employer organizations. What are they? How do you use them? I don't know. We're going to learn about that coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub, and on the show we talk about anything related to HR. I encourage you to please subscribe to the show or to the podcast to keep learning from my great guests. So today my guest is Paul Aemesigeo. I'm not going to say that too many times. I'm struggling with it, but Paul's the founder and head of Payroll Mart. They specialize in payroll, HCMs, and professional employer organizations. Payroll Mart is not a vendor of software, but a service and support organization helping small to mid-sized organizations operate in the U.S. I'm sure there's nuance to this that Paul's going to tell us about. As I understand, PEOs are an American idea, but relevant for smaller companies and relevant for anyone who's looking to move into the United States. Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for coming on. All right, start adding clarity. And my intro may not have been the most accurate. So what is a PEO and what kinds of things does a PEO do?
Yeah, so a PEO is a professional employer organization.
Yeah.
It's a co-employer relationship that the business enters into for the purposes of handling payroll, benefits. The insurance benefits are a very big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Workers' compensation. Workers' compensation is on the job accident or injury.
Mm-hmm.
And then HR compliance and support, especially for companies that are under 50 employees, even under 100 employees are still a good fit, depending on the state that they're located in. And also if they're hiring across state lines. So if they have employees in California and New York and Florida and Texas and Pennsylvania, some of the more difficult compliance states that have really strict mandates from an insurance perspective and paid family leave perspective, the PEO wraps that all together, bundles it all up, charges a fee for it, hires the employees onto the PEO's federal tax ID number.
Okay.
So the employees will be receiving their paycheck from the PEO, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's where the co-employer relationship comes into play.
Okay. You talked about a lot of HR things that a PEO does. What doesn't a PEO do in terms of HR?
It's a great question because PEOs position themselves that they're going to take care of all of the HR compliance, right? They're providing this HR compliant platform and they bundle it up and make it easy for employers. The difficult part, or sort of the practical and kind of tactical part that the PEO is not necessarily able to achieve is managing the day-to-day HR tasks that the employer is going to deal with when they're onboarding new employees, when they're recruiting. The system will be in place to do that stuff and hopefully make it easier. But someone present within the company has to execute and manage the tasks. And that's a major gap that a lot of people don't pay attention to. Because you figure if you have a small company, let's say recently funded, and they're under 10 employees or they're growing between 10 and 20 employees, you have the founder, maybe a small leadership team. What do? They hire a right-hand woman or man, right? An executive assistant or someone who has some HR generalist maybe capability or potential, but hasn't spent a lot of time in the trenches of getting people added to the payroll system and onboarding them and making sure all the benefits, the employees are educated on the benefits. So that's the gap between sort of the reality and kind of I would call it the 7 secrets of the PEO, right? That's one of the things that the PEOs really are not able to handle, the tactical day-to-day stuff.
Right. So, like, let's say somebody goes on leave, PEO or not PEO.
Yeah. So someone goes on leave, there's going to be someone in-house, like someone within the organization that's going to have to manage that leave. Even though they might be a small group, they're going to
Yeah.
be subject to federal large group
Oh,
FMLA, right?
right.
So, because now the small company is now part of a larger organization
Right.
who's subject
Yeah.
to larger organization federal mandates like
Mhm.
federal COBRA, which is being
Right.
able to continue benefits. Yeah. So
Yeah, but that's also the attractive feature that you sort of you get on a P or get with a PEO. I don't know what the right terminology is, but then you have access to bigger, more sophisticated programs.
100%. Yes. Uh, that is one of the major turnkey aspects of the PEO, especially for small companies. They
Mhm.
can launch, they can provide an experience and a benefit package for their employees, especially if they're recruiting employees from larger companies who are
Mhm.
used to having those enterprise level benefits.
Yeah.
That is 100% a huge advantage for PEOs.
Mhm. So how is a PEO different from like just outsourcing payroll or
It's a good
yeah.
question. Yeah, the foundation answer to that is the federal tax ID number. So every US company has a
Mhm.
federal tax ID number that they pay
Yep.
their taxes on, right?
Yep.
And that federal tax ID number is the employer of record if
Mhm.
you outsource your payroll. So if you go to
Yeah.
ADP or
Yeah.
Paychex or Gusto, any of the payroll companies out there that you're going to outsource Paylocity, they're going to use that payroll company is going to take the power of attorney and work with your federal tax ID number, the employer's
Yeah.
federal tax ID number. That's what all the employees are going to, all the compliance is going to be around that federal tax ID number.
Yeah.
And then if you expand in other states, that federal tax ID number has to be registered in other states. And then you're
Yeah.
issued a state tax ID number.
Oh.
So it all remains under that employer of record.
Mhm.
That's the outsourcing model. When you go into a PEO, now your federal tax ID number is stepping aside, so to speak,
Yeah.
and your employees are going to be hired by the tax ID number, federal tax ID of the PEO.
Right. That has to be have some complicated accounting to it.
Well, the corporate tax return,
Mhm.
when
Yeah,
the
yeah.
federal
That's
tax
like
return that
that's what I
you
mean, yeah.
file, that still is filed in your own tax ID number. So the PEO doesn't supersede or step in between you and the
But they would have
IRS there.
yeah, but the PEO would have to provide the employer with all the relevant information for them to
Correct.
file.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So all
Okay.
the payroll expense related information, correct.
Okay. Okay. We
It
are
gets
really diving.
Yeah, it gets further complicated depending on the state and what tax ID number,
Yeah.
whether you keep your tax ID number. So I don't want to bore your audience, but yeah, there is an extra layer of complication depending on the state that you hire employees in.
Right. This sounds it sounds complicated. Okay, stepping back, we dove right into the details. Okay, but so what's the business case for using a PEO? Or like, give me a couple of business cases for
Yeah,
using a PEO.
I would say the New York and California are highly compliant states, and
Mhm.
small groups in those states, especially New York, it's difficult if you're between 2 and 100 employees in New York.
Mhm.
The health insurance expense is very, very high.
Mm.
It's very expensive to offer health insurance for your employees.
Mm. Yeah.
So if you're a white collar business in the state of New York, meaning that you don't have a lot of exposure of employees getting hurt on the job,
Mhm.
right? If they're sitting at a desk and they're not lifting heavy boxes and driving on trucks and working in warehouses.
Yeah.
Because workers' compensation is a big part of the PEO, so we can get to that separately. But if so the use case, business case, you're in New York, you have 10, 15, 20 employees, you just launched, you just got funded, you don't necessarily have the budget to hire an HR consultant, right? To come and run anything, or you hire an HR consultant and you want to make it as easy as possible for them in terms of like the payroll outsourcing and giving them good technology, and they can just focus on recruiting and building your team.
Yeah.
Then that's when you would put a PEO in place.
Right.
Now, let's say you scale beyond 100 employees and you're still located in New York headquarters, but you have employees all over the country right now, you still may want to stay within a PEO. But that is a time to consider coming out of a PEO once you surpass 100 employees, because then your insurance broker or your HR consultant, they can work together to shop out the benefits, the health insurance, the dental insurance, all of those benefits, and negotiate better rates since you surpassed that 100 employee mark.
When we were talking earlier, you had also mentioned that employers or companies wanting to enter the United States and hire people in the United States, that this might be a great option for them too.
But yeah, that's a perfect example where it would make the sort of non-domestic or the company abroad's life a lot easier, trying to source the different benefits and be compliant with all the various state laws, DC and California. So if they could just roll it out under a PEO, it would be a lot easier.
What size companies should be considering using a PEO? And I suppose it's not size of company. It's just number of employees in the United States.
Yeah, I would say number of employees in the state that they're located. So in New York State, 2 to 100 employees. Yeah. Outside of New York State, it depends on the state and the makeup of the company. You can get pretty competitive health insurance rates even below 50 employees. So like in the state of New Jersey or state of Pennsylvania, you can get what's called level funded type of benefits for health insurance.
Okay.
And some of your audience would be familiar with that.
A lot of my audience, because a lot of my audience is in the States.
Yeah. So, depending on the state, depending on the demographics of the group, meaning that if they're a relatively younger group, possibly healthier group, even though we don't know, but maybe you get a sense of the health of the group. You could probably keep them out of a PEO and package together really competitive rates. If you have an HR consultant involved that's kind of managing everything. The quick answer is I would say 5 to 50 employees outside of New York. Within New York, it's 2 to 100. You want to consider a PEO.
So if someone out there is considering a PEO, wants to, start a company, what should they be thinking about in terms of evaluating the PEO? Because I imagine there's a whole bunch of them.
Well, first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're talking to a certified PEO. So the IRS has a list of certified PEOs. All the larger PEOs are pretty much all certified. So ADP has a PEO, Paychex has a PEO. There's Insperity. I'm sure you've heard of maybe the commercials for Insperity. There's Rippling has a PEO. Yeah. So what I would say that the first thing to consider is, how is the PEO charging? Are they charging a percentage of payroll? Where it's might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. I'm not going to say it's 4 or 5%, but they kind of bury their pricing throughout the payroll. So if you have highly compensated employees and you're paying out bonuses and they're going to make a lot of money, percentage of payroll PEO scenario may not be the way to go. Whereas JustWorks, they charge a flat anywhere from $79 per employee per month to $99 per employee per month, depending on how you pay the fees. You can prepay those fees. Where
Right.
someone like ADP or Paychex, they'll never offer that scenario to you, because
Yeah.
those 10 employees may be highly compensated and they could make quite a bit of money on
Right.
that, right?
A lot of those companies you shared, they're payroll companies.
Yes, correct.
So is effectively uh, PEO mostly they're about payroll, and then they say they do all the other things, but they don't
It's a
do
good
them.
question. What they've done really well is their PEO divisions, you know,
Yeah.
they've acquired PEOs,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
where they've started separate divisions. Like payroll controls the employer, right? Payroll has all the information on all the employees,
Yep.
has
Yep.
all their salary information.
Yep.
It's sort of the hub, right? Like
Yep. Yep.
it,
Oh, there's a ton of info there.
yeah. So that's why the payroll companies have been very successful in kind of creating these PEO divisions, kind of offshoot type of services.
So these payroll companies, as we just discussed, they're acquiring PEOs. Uh, are there things that a lot of PEOs say they're good at, or say services they say they can provide, but they're not actually that good at?
I would say the biggest thing is the HR, is the practical, tactical HR support that clients need. That's
Mhm.
it's really hard to replace by just offering a technology platform, right? Like actually,
Yeah. Like you can't, like, let's say you have a performance problem.
yeah,
The PEO is not going to walk a supervisor through that.
correct. Or
But
they may, but not great.
okay. Or yeah, they're
Yeah,
like the phone service, of the old days where
yeah.
you call up somebody and sort of disengaged other person on the end of the phone.
Like that's the biggest gap is like I think the perception possibly is, hey, I'm part of the PEO. They're going to take care of everything for me. I'm just going to call them when I have a problem, when I have a tax issue or a compliance issue, and I think they're going to do as best that they can do. But first of
Mhm.
all, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of clients,
Mm.
and they're still going to say, hey, like, we're providing you the platform and the environment and we're giving you the benefits, but you still have to have someone kind of drive the car. So that's not, I think, entirely clearly explained,
Mm.
especially if it's an inexperienced startup.
Employer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, we're getting to the end of this. So it's just so interesting the way different companies do it or countries do it. Where can someone find you and learn more about you and or Payroll Mart? Because Payroll Mart is not a PEO.
Correct. Yep. We're a service provider and support.
So would a PEO use you to provide their payroll and
A,
ATM?
a
No.
PEO would want me to refer, like you and I, if you and I were working a group together,
Yeah.
you were handling the HR, you would say to the group, I have Paul, who's going to help us with the payroll and the benefits, and
Mm.
and maybe find us a broker,
Yeah.
and maybe shop out some PEOs for us.
Okay.
So
You're a consultant. Are you a
we would,
consultant?
I'm sort of in my lane
Yeah.
within the ecosystem,
Mm.
right? So I fit like this little niche that
Mhm.
not a lot of people do,
Mhm.
and uh, a PEO would want you and I to kind of
Mhm.
bring the business to them,
Oh,
right? And
oh,
bundle it up nice, and basically serve it on a platter, and they really don't have to do much
right.
because the group has someone like you and I who are putting out the fires, like providing the support, making their life, both the client and the PEO, like really
Mhm.
smooth. Whether the client goes direct to a PEO
Mhm.
or they go through someone like us or their insurance broker, the fees are already accounted for. Like a revenue share is already accounted for anyway.
But if they hire us and they hire a PEO, that's two companies they have to pay versus just hiring the PEO. But the PEO isn't going to help them through.
Correct. There's going to be gaps from a support perspective.
Yes.
No matter what the PEO says or what the client thinks, there's going to be gaps and sort of headaches and frustration.
Headaches and frustrations and damage to the employee experience and the relationship of trust that most employers are trying to build with their talent.
And what inevitably happens is the employer gets frustrated or the employees get frustrated. So then the employer's like, okay, now I need to move.
From a PEO.
I want to move out of a PEO.
Yeah.
Or I want to go to a new one.
Yeah.
What they typically do is they may start with they may start with an ADP. Or they may start with a Paychex. And then they get pissed off. And then they're like, I want to go to a smaller one. So then they may go to like a JustWorks. And then they may grow, or they may.
And then they're like, I need ADP again.
And then they're like, then I want to come out of the PEO. And that's what we specialize in that as well. So coming out of the PEO is a whole nother sort of venture in unraveling it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I can see how that would be, and that you coming out of PEO, you really would need help so quickly, though, because we've had a whole interview, and I should wrap this up, but quickly, what are some of the considerations in coming out of a PEO?
Yep, so the number one consideration, depending on whether you're blue collar or white collar. So it's like if you're a blue collar, a lot of blue collar company, blue gray collar, where they have warehouse, people on trucks, driving forklifts. Higher exposure of getting hurt on the job.
Yeah.
First thing they needed to do, they need to get a workers' compensation insurance quote outside of the PEO. They need to get that quote through their broker and have that ready, because that will tell them if an outside market, like another insurance company, will take risk. Otherwise, they're stuck in the PEO.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do.
That's a big factor. If it's a white collar situation, no workers' comp claims, then the health insurance component is a really big. So same insurance broker or the health insurance broker needs to go out and get a competitive health insurance and dental quote and see how that compares to the PEO pricing.
Yeah.
And if that's sort of on a similar level playing field, if not less, then it's time to come out of the PEO, because then you're going to save on the administration fees.
Okay. All right. We'll leave it there. All right. Where can someone find you and learn more about?
So LinkedIn or payrollmart.com. We have payrollmart.com/HR mini audit. They can take a sort of a mini audit with us.
Yeah.
And we work with HR consultants, and we can kind of flesh out where they need on the HR side versus where we plug in and build a plan for them.
All right. Well, thanks, Paul. I love that. That was a fascinating insight into something I knew nothing about, wasn't even aware of. And that's kind of fun after so many episodes. I did an episode recently on compensation surveying, which we're sort of talking about pay here. And a link to that is right here. Thanks for watching out there, and we'll see you next time.